Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah. Here we're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph, and Mirza Hashem today we will complete Daf Tzadik Aleph Amud Beis as well as do a piece of Tzadik Beis Amud Aleph. So we're continuing to learn Hilchos Krias Shema, and we pick up on Tzadik Aleph Amud Beis near the end of Siman Nun Ches Sif Vav, about halfway down on Tzadik Aleph Amud Beis. Says the Mechaber, even though we have learned that the Seif Zman Krias Shema, that the Zman of Krias Shema, I misspoke. Even though we have learned that the Zman of Krias Shema extends all the way till the end of the third hour of the day, Im Avra Shashlishis, if you missed this Zman, if the end of the third hour of the day has passed, V'loi Kira'ah, and you have not recited Krias Shema, Kairei Oisa Bebirchaiseha Kol Shah Revius, you could still say Krias Shema for the entire fourth hour together with the birchas Krias Shema, Shehu Shlish Hayoim, because the fourth hour is the end of the first third of the day. Ve'ein lo schar ki kairei bizmana, but you do not get schar for saying Krias Shema bizmana, because you in fact have not said Krias Shema bizmana. Basically, the halacha Mechaber is telling me over here is that there is a great difference between birchas Krias Shema and Krias Shema itself. The truth is that the term birchas Krias Shema is a little bit of a misnomer. Normally, when we refer to a bracha on a mitzvah, right? So let's say we're talking about the mitzvah of shofar, and we talk about the birchas of shofar. Well, the birchas of shofar are birchas ha-mitzvahs. It's a bracha on the mitzvah of shofar. So we say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvahsav v'tzivanu lishmaya kol shofar. So the bracha that we make on shofar is the birchas ha-mitzvahs that goes on the mitzvah of shofar. When we speak about birchas Krias Shema, the birchas Krias Shema are not birchas ha-mitzvahs on Krias Shema. Like the Mishnah Berurah is going to point out, at no point do we say, Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvahsav v'tzivanu likroi Krias Shema. Now, you want to know why that is, that's a discussion for another time. But Lamaisa, we don't make a bracha, Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvahsav v'tzivanu likroi Krias Shema. The brachas that we make, Yotzer Arav Arechoshech, Yotzer Shalom Avares HaKoil, Baruch atah Hashem Yotzer HaMa'oros, Baruch atah Hashem HaBoicher B'Amo Yisrael, Ba'ahava, Baruch atah Hashem Gal Yisrael. At no point do we mention Krias Shema in those brachas. So, exactly why are they called birchas Krias Shema? What do they have to do with Krias Shema? And the Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us that in truth, these are brachas that the Chazal were misaken. They're birchas shvach, the brachas of praise to the Rabbeinu Shalom, and the Chazal, the Anshe Knesset Sagdola, were misaken them to be recited around Krias Shema, but they're not so closely related to Krias Shema. Now, the Zman of Krias Shema is dependent upon the pasuk of B'shach B'cha V'kumecha. So when we try to figure out what the Zman Krias Shema Shel Yom is, we have to follow the pasuk that says Uv'kumecha. The Zman of Krias Shema Shel Yom is when people are getting up for the day. That's what's going to determine the Tchilas Zman Krias Shema and the Sof Zman Krias Shema of Krias Shema Shel Yom. But that's not what's going to determine the Zman of birchas Krias Shema. Birchas Krias Shema have nothing to do with B'shach B'cha V'kumecha. What determines the Zman of birchas Krias Shema? Well, birchas Krias Shema essentially is a tefillah. It's a prayer. So you know what determines the Zman of birchas Krias Shema? Zman tefillah. What's Zman tefillah? Zman tefillah is shlish hayoim. Zman tefillah is the first third of the day, which is the first 4 hours of the day, not the first 3 hours of the day. For that reason, says the Mechaber here in Sivav, even though the Zman Krias Shema only extends to the end of the third hour, still, im avra shashlishis v'loi kira'ah, if the third hour passed and you did not yet say Krias Shema, Koirei oisa bebirchas, you should recite Krias Shema together with its brachas, kol shar revius, for the entire fourth hour, shehu shlish hayoim. Why? Because you could still say birchas Krias Shema. Now, birchas Krias Shema is not so divorced from Krias Shema that we're going to have you say birchas Krias Shema without Krias Shema. It's still birchas Krias Shema. Chazal were masakin these brachas around Krias Shema. So even though the first 3 hours of the day have passed, you still have another hour to say birchas Krias Shema. So say Krias Shema together with its brachas. But like the Mechaber says, ve'ein lo yischar k'korei b'zmana. But you're not going to get schar for saying Krias Shema b'zmana, because in fact you did not say Krias Shema b'zmana. This that you're saying Krias Shema during the fourth hour is not because somehow you could still be yotze Krias Shema b'zmana. It's because you could be yotze saying birchas Krias Shema b'zmanom. And in order to do that, you need to say Krias Shema. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah here. Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Chav Daled. Kira'ah. If you did not yet say Krias Shema. Says the Mishnah Berurah, first of all, afilu b'pshia. This is true even if the reason you did not yet say Krias Shema was out of sheer negligence. V'nera Pashut, and the Chavetz Chaim says it seems obvious, Damasha Kosa v'loi kira'ah lav dafka. When the Mechaber says that this halacha is true, if you did not say Krias Shema, Chavetz Chaim says that's not really precise. Tehu hadin, afilu kara oisa kula mikoidem bizmana beloy birchaiseha. This same halacha would apply. Let's say somebody got up and he actually davened Krias Shema by nets. He davened Krias Shema kivasikin. He said Krias Shema, he recited Krias Shema 5 minutes before Netzachama. He didn't daven. He said Krias Shema, and he had in mind to be yotze the mitzvah of Krias Shema. So he was yotze the mitzvah of Krias Shema, but he didn't daven. So he never said birchas Krias Shema. So points out the Chavetz Chaim, the Mechaber says that this halacha that you should recite Krias Shema together with the brachas during the fourth hour. He says, in what context does he say that halacha? He says the third hour passed, v'loi kira'ah, and you didn't recite Krias Shema. Says the Chavetz Chaim, no, this halacha applies even if you did say Krias Shema. In our case, this fellow said Krias Shema before Netzachama, but he didn't say birchas Krias Shema. So as long as it's not the end of the fourth hour of the day, he should say Krias Shema again, together with the birchas Krias Shema, so that he'll be yotze saying birchas Krias Shema in the proper time. Says the Mishnah Berurah inside, v'nera Pashut, Damasha Kasa v'loi kira'ah, when the Mechaber writes this halacha in the context of one who did not say Krias Shema, lav davka, that's imprecise. Tehu adin afilu kara oisa kula, even if the same halacha would apply, even if he indeed recited the entire Krias Shema, mikoidem earlier, bizmana, in its zman, during the first 3 hours of the day, albeit beloy birchaiseha, but he recited Krias Shema without the brachas. Now, he should say Krias Shema again together with the brachas. So why did the Mechaber write it the way he wrote it? Elo l'revusa nokte. The reason the Mechaber wrote it this way was to tell us a chiddush. Deloi nema, we should not say, kevan deloi kara'a klal ad ata garua yoiser. You might say, if a person mamish neglected to say Krias Shema until the end of Zman Krias Shema, and he allowed Zman Krias Shema to pass, maybe that's even worse, and maybe he loses out on saying birchas Krias Shema. In our case, where he said Krias Shema bizman, so we would say, okay, he said Krias Shema, now we're going to still allow him to go ahead and say birchas Krias Shema during the fourth hour. But maybe if somebody b'shat nefesh didn't say Krias Shema during Zman Krias Shema, he allowed the whole Zman Krias Shema to pass without saying Krias Shema, maybe we don't let him say birchas Krias Shema anymore. Kamash Balan, no, you do. The Chay Kasa Behedya Bebeis Yosef Seif Siman Memvav, and the Chavetz Chaim says you can see this halacha spelled out clearly in the Beis Yosef on the Torah in Siman Memvav Ayin Sham. Ubechuvas Mishkanos Yaakov Siman Pei Mefakvik Bazeh. The Mishkanos Yaakov takes issue with this. Heicha Demitchila Kara Eskula. In our case that we brought up, if somebody did indeed say Krias Shema Bismana, then the Mishkanas Yaakov isn't so sure about saying birchas Krias Shema Ayin Sham. Chavei Shar Revius. The Mechaber said that you have the whole 4th hour to say birchas Krias Shema. Now the Mishnah Berurah is going to explain what I spoke out in the beginning. What's the rationale for this? The birchas einam shayachim leKriyas Shema. It's a very interesting statement. He brings this down from the Rashba. It seems to fly in the face of the fact that we call these brachas birchas Kriyas Shema. Says the Chavetz Chaim, the brachas einam shayachim leKriyas Shema. These brachas are not really so tightly connected to Kriyas Shema. Even though Chazal established to say these brachas surrounding Kriyas Shema, they're not really brachas on Kriyas Shema. It's not a birchas on mitzvahs that we're making a bracha on the mitzvah of say Kriyas Shema. Essentially, these brachas are tefillos. They're prayers. That's what they are. And therefore, dinam k'may tefillas hashachar. So the halacha that governs the zman of birchas Kriyas Shema is the same halacha that governs Shemon Esrei, zman tefillah. Shehu rak at shlish hayom. Zman tefillah extends not the first quarter of the day till the end of the 3rd hour, like Kriyas Shema. It extends the first third of the day to the end of the 4th hour. Okay, now let's go weiter here in the Mechaber. 3 lines up from the end of the Siman, in the middle of the line. How about, says the Mechaber, V'im avra sharavius v'loi kara'a. Let's say the end of the 4th hour has already passed. So now you already missed out on Zman Tefillah, v'loi kara'a, and you still haven't said Kriyas Shema. Says the Mechaber, at that point, Kaira b'loi birchaiseha kol hayom. You could recite Kriyas Shema without the birchas Kriyas Shema. You could no longer say the birchas Kriyas Shema. It's after Zman Tefillah. It's after the 4th hour of the day. So you can no longer say birchas Kriyas Shema. So the Mechaber says, Kaira b'loi birchaiseha, recite Kriyas Shema, so you should be mekabel ol malchus shamayim. Kol hayom, you can say Kriyas Shema whenever you want. So say Kriyas Shema the rest of the day. You're not going to be yotze your chiv of Kriyas Shema shel Shachris. You blew it. You missed the boat. Like Shlomo HaMelech says in Kehelis, it's a twisted thing that can no longer be fixed. There's no way to make up for it. But still, you should say Kriyas Shema to be mekabel ol malchus shamayim. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah, Eis Katan Chavav, Avra Shar Revius, says the Chavetz Chaim, this halacha, that once the 4th hour passed, you could no longer say birchas Kriyas Shema, afilu nenas. This is even if you had a bona fide onus. You were a victim of circumstances. Doesn't matter. You still can't say birchas Kriyas Shema. Afilu achi mikan ve'elachif said brachas. Once it's the end of the 4th hour and later, you have lost out on your ability to say birchas Kriyas Shema. And not only that, the imbirach, if you do go ahead and say birchas Kriyas Shema, have a bracha levatala. It brings down the Shitas HaRosh and the Torah, and we'll see in the Bir Halacha. Most Achronim seem to follow this way. The Mechaber follows this. The imbirach have a bracha levatala. If you say the birchas Kriyas Shema after the 4th hour of the day, even though you were nenas, even though you were a victim of an onus, you can't say it anymore. If you do it, it's a bracha levatala. But he sends us to the Bir Halacha. V'ayin Bir Halacha dibur hamaschel koira. Let's see this Bir Halacha. It's here at the end of the Bir Halacha here at Tzadik Aleph Amud Beis. Koira b'loi birchaiseha. The Mechaber said that after the 4th hour of the day, you should say Kriyas Shema without birchas Kriyas Shema. Ayin b'Mishnah Berurah, he tells us to take a look at what he wrote in the Mishnah Berurah in Sif Katan Chav Zayin, where, you know what? Let's actually do Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Chav Zayin first. Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Chav Zayin says, Koira, you should say Kriyas Shema without the brachas. Ayin b'levush shekasav yochal likroisa. The Mechaber seems to say, the Mechaber says, if you v'im avra shar revius of a loy kira'a, if the 4th hour passed and you did not say Kriyas Shema koira'a, he's telling you go and say Kriyas Shema V'loy birchas, without the brachas. Sounds from the lashon of the mechaber like you're mechuyev to say Krias Shema. So says the Mishnah Berurah here, Ayin b'lavush, take a look at the lavush, Shakasavu writes that notwithstanding the chosen language of the mechaber, what it really means is yochel likroisa. You're able to say Krias Shema without the brachas the rest of the day. I mean, you can say Krias Shema whenever you want, but you're not mechuyev to say it. V'hakavanahu, the intent behind this lavush is shetoiv sheyikra'ena. It is a good thing to do to say Krias Shema the rest of the day. Why? Kadei sheyikabel alav al malchus shamayim, so that you should be makabel al malchus shamayim by saying Krias Shema. Avaleina mechuyev, but you're not mechuyev to say Krias Shema. Sheina mekayim bazeh mitzvah say the Krias Shema, because now that it's so late in the day, you're no longer going to be yotzei your chiyuv. You're no longer going to fulfill the mitzvah of Krias Shema. It's too late. Like all the achrayim agree, she'ein nimshach zman Krias Shema min HaTorah rak ad shalosh shoyis v'chanal. The zman Krias Shema only extends to the end of the third hour of the day. So when the mechaber says that if the fourth hour passed, Kara'ah, you should say Krias Shema, he doesn't mean that you're mechuyev to say Krias Shema and you're going to be yotzei the mitzvah. You're not yotzei the mitzvah. It's too late. You missed the boat. But you should know, says the Chavetz Chaim, the Bikom Mokayim, Parshas Tzitzitz, Oishari Psukim, Shehem Mezachiras Yitzias Mitzrayim, mechuyev ben HaTorah kol hayoim. While it's true that you cannot be yotzei the mitzvah of Krias Shema anymore, because it's too late, you missed the Zman Krias Shema, let's remember that when we say Krias Shema, there's two mitzvahs that we're being yotzei. We're being yotzei the mitzvah say of Krias Shema, but there's another mitzvah say midaraisa that we're being yotzei, and that is the chiyuv of zechiras yitzias Mitzrayim, the chiyuv that we have to mention Yitzias Mitzrayim. So says the Chavetz Chaim, if you missed Zman Krias Shema, I'm telling you now that you no longer have a chiyuv to say Krias Shema, because that's too late, you missed the boat, but you still have a chiyuv of zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim. Therefore says the Chavetz Chaim, maybe you should say the third parsha of Krias Shema, Vayomer, the parsha of Tzitzitz, because it has it in Ani Hashem Elokeichem Asher Yitzei Eschem Me'eretz Mitzrayim Liyos Lachem Le'Elokim, Oishari Psukim, or some other psukim of the Torah, Shehem Mezachiras Yitzias Mitzrayim, that mention Yitzias Mitzrayim, that mechuyev min HaTorah kol hayoim. That you have a chiyuv asay midaraisa that has no zman, it goes the whole day. You have a chiyuv to mention Yitzias Mitzrayim once during the day and once at night, but that goes all the way until nightfall. There is no set time midaraisa for that chiyuv. Siman Yud, the Ado Erev, whose manus chiras Yitzias Mitzrayim, that the chiyuv of zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim goes all the way until nightfall. Ayin Shab. Now let's go back to this Bir Halacha. Koira b'loy birchas, the bottom of the Bir Halacha on Tzadik Aleph Amud Beis. He says, Ayin me Mishnah Berurah Sif Katan Chav Zayin. V'av shedas ha'pri chadash kedas ha'Rambam. Shaloi nasan kev ala brachos. We said here in the Mishnah Berurah, that once the fourth hour of the day passed, you can no longer say birchas Krias Shema. Why? Because birchas Krias Shema essentially is tefillah. The zman of birchas Krias Shema is therefore governed by zman tefillah. Zman tefillah extends through the fourth hour of the day. Once the fourth hour of the day passed, Zman Tefillah is gone. Zman Tefillah is gone, you can no longer say birchas Krias Shema. And the Mishnah Berurah went so far as to say in Ois Katan Chavav that if you say birchas Krias Shema after the fourth hour of the day, you're actually over ad lo yisis Hashem hashav. You said a bracha levatala. Says the Bir Halacha here, Av shedas ha'pri chadash kedas ha'Rambam. Even though we have a pri chadash who paskins like the shitas ha'Rambam. What's the shitas Rambam in this? Shaloi nosan kev ala brachis. The Rambam says that there is no set time for birchas Krias Shema. he disagrees with this concept that birchas Krias Shema is governed by Zman Tefillah. He says, no, there's no set time for birchas Krias Shema. Now, if according to the Rambam, you should be able to say birchas Krias Shema the whole day, even if you missed the fourth hour. However, says the Chavetz Chaim, Kvar posku rava achronim v'chamat kulan, the majority of the achronim and almost all of the achronim, paskin kulan kedas harosh v'haTorah v'hashulchan aruch. They all paskin like the Rosh and the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch, who says, like we said, that birchas Krias Shema is governed by Zman Tefillah. V'ayin b'tshuvas Mishkanos Yaakov b'Siman Pei. However, he says, take a look at the Tshuvas Mishkanos Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov Emden, in Siman Pei. Shedaitoi, it is his opinion. Shedaitoi noita, his das leans towards saying lachriya to paskin b'dieved ad chatzos. That b'dieved you could say birchas Krias Shema until chatzos. K'moi gabi tefillah, similar to Shemona Esrei, the common law l'kamon b'Siman Pei Tesif Aleph. We paskin later on in Siman Pei Tesif Aleph. Shem over azman tefillah, that if you missed the fourth hour of the day, Zman Tefillah has passed. Afal pikein mispal ad chatzos. You could daven until chatzos ayin sham. V'efshir sheyesh lismay chazel inyanim ha'yaloi oinis shaloi ha'yoyachal likreis habrachos ad arbeshois. The Bir Halachos suggests that you could be soimich on this Mishkanos Yaakov if you had an oinus, if you weren't negligent, if you had an oinus that prevented you from saying Krias Shema, birchas Krias Shema, until the end of the fourth hour, you could be soimich then on this Mishkanos Yaakov, and you could say birchas Krias Shema until chatzos. Ki matzasi b'sefer maharil hilchos tefillah shakasa b'shem maharash sha'aminig lahakal b'nenas shaloi lahafsan habrachos. That the minig is that by an oinus, you could rely on this psak, and you could be mekel, and you could say birchas Krias Shema all the way until chatzos. Okay. Now we go to Sif Zayin, the final Sif in Siman Ches. Says the Mechaber, Im loy kira'a bayoim, very, very fascinating halacha here. He says, Im loy kira'a bayoim, if you failed to say Krias Shema by day, the entire day passed by and you never said Krias Shema. Yesh Omrim, there are those that say, brings this down, the Beragola brings this down, he says it's from the Kolbai, in the name of Rabbeinu Chaim. Im loy kira'a bayoim, if you did not say Krias Shema by day at all, Yesh Omrim sheyesh la tashlumin ba'arvis. There are those that say that there's a din tashlumin on Krias Shema. We know that there's a din tashlumin on Shemona Esrei. If somebody didn't daven Shachris, he could daven two Shemona Esreis by Mincha. The first one is Mincha, the second one is tashlumin. It's a make-up for Shachris. Somebody did daven Mincha, he could say two Shemona Esreis by Ma'ariv. The first one is for Ma'ariv, the second one is a tashlumin for Mincha. So there are those that say that there's a tashlumin for Krias Shema. You didn't say Krias Shema by day, you say Krias Shema twice at night in order to make up a tashlumin for the lost Krias Shema. So I'm loy kara bayoim, yesh oimrim sheyesh la tashlumin ba'arvis. V'cheinim loy kara Krias Shema ba'arvis. And similarly, if you neglected to say Krias Shema at night, yesh la tashlumin bayoim. There's a concept of tashlumin, say Krias Shema twice in the morning. The first one would be for Krias Shema shel Shachris. You always say the one that's for that Zman first. So if you're davening two Krias Shema's Shachris, in order to make up for the one that you missed by Ma'ariv, the first Krias Shema that you say is Krias Shema shel Shachris. The second Krias Shema that you would say would be a tashlumin for Ma'ariv. But v'yesh chelkim, however, there are those that disagree with this psak. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Chav Ches, sheyesh la tashlumin, ein hakavana sheyetze bazeh yidei Krias Shema. Says the Chavetz Chaim, even this shita that says that there's a concept of tashlumin, it's not a tashlumin that's going to allow you to fulfill the mitzvah of Krias Shema. That's already gone. You missed the boat on Krias Shema, so you're not being yoytze Krias Shema. Mayachish kvar over zmana ve'eno yelik kairei b'Torah. It's you'll get schar for reading psukim of the Torah. Rak shalachatchila tzarich la'ashlima k'may tefillah. But still, there is an inyan. You lost it. You have to make it up. You're not going to be yoytze the mitzvah, but you still have to make up for what you lost. Since this is a tashlumin like the tashlumin of davening of Shemoneh Esrei, the same halacha applies as by Shemoneh Esrei, which is mibayale la'agdume chayva shaita bereisha. You have to give preference. Tzarich la'agdume mibayale la'agdume. You have to give preference to chayva shaita, to the chiyuv of this time slot first. So, like I said, if you're saying Krias Shema twice by Shacharis to make up for a lost Krias Shema by Ma'ariv, right now you're by Shacharis. The chiyuv d'shaita, the obligation of this time slot, is Krias Shema shel Shacharis. So you give preference to Krias Shema shel Shacharis. The first Krias Shema that you recite will be for the chiyuv that you have right now, the chiyuv of Krias Shema shel Shacharis. The second Krias Shema that you're going to say is not really even being Mekayim a chiyuv. By saying it, you're not going to be Mekayim the mitzvah that you were supposed to say Krias Shema last night. It's a tashlumin, it's a makeup for something that you lost. But you're still not going to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Krias Shema shel Arvis. The tekef achamayriv, yikra it shema b'shvil zeh apam shechiser in b'shogeg chisra. What you would do is, you would daven a whole ma'ariv. Don't say, the bracha of Hamarav Aravim, the bracha of Avarabba, and then say Krias Shema twice. No, you'll daven a whole ma'ariv with Shemoneh Esrei and everything, and then right after Shemoneh Esrei, say another Krias Shema to make up for Krias Shema shel Shacharis that you missed. However, there are those that disagree with this psak, and they hold that there is no concept of tashlumin on Krias Shema. V'yesh cholkin hagra v'habirka Yosef echriu k'deyazu. The Gra and the Birka Yosef, they are machriya like this opinion that there is no such concept as tashlumin by Krias Shema. Okay, I'm going to start Siman Nun Tes. I'm only going to do a little bit, but we will at least start Siman Nun Tes, at least get on to the next page. Siman Nun Tes, Din Bracha Rishayna B'Yotzer U'Bay Hei Seifim. The halachos that pertain to the opening of birchas Krias Shema, the bracha of Yotzer Or V'Arei Choshech Oiseh Shalom U'Varei HaSakoil. That's the way the bracha begins. The end of that bracha is Yotzer HaMa'oros. This bracha is what's called a bracha arichta. This is a long bracha. It has a psicha, it has an opening, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, and it also has a chasima that also has a Baruch Atah Hashem. It starts off Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Yotzer Or V'Arei Choshech Oiseh Shalom U'Varei HaSakoil. And then we have Hamer La'aretz, Shem HaKel, Kedusha, L'Kel Baruch Ni'imos Yitenu, and then the closure of that bracha is Baruch Atah Hashem Yotzer HaMa'oros. That's all one bracha. All of that text is all one bracha. And that's the first bracha of birchas Krias Shema before Krias Shema. Right? Remember, by Shacharis, we have three birchas Krias Shema. Two before Krias Shema, that's the bracha that starts Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Yotzer Or and ends Yotzer HaMa'oros. Then we have a second bracha, which is the bracha of Avarabba. That's a bracha smucha l'chaverta. It doesn't open with Baruch because it's smucha l'chaverta to the bracha of Yotzer HaMa'oros. But it has a psicha, it has a chsima, it closes off Baruch Atah Hashem Abaychem Am Yisrael Ba'ava. So that's two birchas Krias Shema before Krias Shema. Then we have Krias Shema. Then we have a long bracha that starts V'yatziv v'nachayin and it ends Baruch Atah Hashem Gal Yisrael right before Shemoneh Esrei. That's the third bracha of birchas Krias Shema shel Shacharis, and that's the bracha of Gal Yisrael that comes after Krias Shema and right before Shemoneh Esrei. By Ma'ariv we have four brachas. Two before Krias Shema, two after Krias Shema, for a total of 7 birchas Krias Shema during the day. This, the Gemara says, is to fulfill the pasuk in Tehillim where David HaMelech says, Sheva b'yom hilalticha. 7 times during the day I praise you, Rabbeinu Shalom. That's the 7 birchas Krias Shema. So, says the Mechaber, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Yotzer Or V'Arei Choshech. That's the beginning of the first bracha of the birchas Krias Shema of the day. And points out the Mechaber, Tiknu lahaskir midas laila b'yoyim. We say Yotzer Or, who creates light, U'Barei Choshech, and creates darkness. Why are we mentioning darkness? We're making a bracha now. This is birchas Krias Shema shel Yom. It's supposed to be light outside. So why are we mentioning over here Borei Choshech? We would think that Borei Choshech would be appropriate for Ma'ariv. Why is it part of Shachris? Explains the Mechaber, Tiknu lahaske midos laila b'yoim. The Chazal, the Achiknes Zagdola wa Misakin, that we should mention something about night during the day. Lahoitzi mileva bikursim, to take away, to go against the heretics. Sha'imrim, who used to say, Shemisha bara or loy bara choshech. The Kaifrim used to say, nah, the Rabbeinu Shalom only created oir. The Rabbeinu Shalom only created light. The Rabbeinu Shalom only creates wonderful, delicious, happy things like light and day and toiv, things that are good. Choshech, Laila, darkness, night. Those are euphemisms for tzaras. Nah, tzaras don't come from the Rabbeinu Shalom. Tzaras come from the devil. Tzaras come from the Satan. That's kfir, Rabbi say. Everything comes from the Rabbeinu Shalom. Everything comes from the Rabbeinu Shalom. What we see as good, what we see as bad is not bad either. Everything is toiv. The Rabbeinu Shalom is a meitiv. But everything comes from the Rabbeinu Shalom. So says the Mechaber, lahoitzi mileva apikursim, to go against the mindset of the kaifrim, of the heretics. We mention night even by day, because the kaifrim said, shemisha bar or loy bar choshech. Says the Mishnah Berurah, is cut in Aleph, bottom line, Tzadik Aleph of the base, Tzarech lahafsik bein yotzer ubein oir. When we make the bracha of yotzer oir, we have to be very careful to enunciate Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, yotzer oir uvorei choshech. Yotzer oir, it's two words, yotzer oir, who formed light. Why? Why is this so important? Because if you say it fast, Yotzerer, it sounds like one word, Yotzerer. What does the word Yotzerer mean? The answer is, doesn't mean anything. Yotzer means the one who formed light. Yotzerer is not a word. It doesn't mean anything. Reminds me when we were younger, we used to joke around that people nowadays don't know the words of Kaddish. We remember, for we were kids, the words from Kaddish, the words from Kaddish. Ois Shambraimov, Hiyash Malayni, Valkal Yisrael, V'yimenu Umayim. So, right, it's Oiseh Shalom B'Meraimov, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu. When we were kids, it all sounded like two words. Ois Shambraimov, Hiyash Malayni. So there's no such word as Ois Shambraimov, and there's no such word as Hiyash Malayni. Right? It's Oiseh Shalom B'Meraimov, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu. So says the Chavetz Chaim over here, don't say Yotzerer. Yotzerer is not a word. It's Yotzer Oir. And he tells us, V'ayin beber heitiv u'b'chari tshuva, mashe kasav oid bazeh. He tells us to look at the ber heitiv in the shari tshuva. I want to read this ber heitiv, because this ber heitiv just goes to show you the layers and layers and layers that exist in davening that we don't even begin to comprehend. Says the ber heitiv over here, ois cotton aleph. Tzarech lahafsik bein yotzer ubein oir. Like we just learned in the Mishnah Berurah, you have to take a pause between the word yotzer and the word oir. Ki heichi de lo yishtama yotzerer. So it shouldn't sound like you're saying yotzerer, right? Because, like we said, there's no such word as yotzerer. Then he points out some other things that we have to be very careful of in birchas Krias Shema. Says the ber heitiv, where we get to before as Shem Hakel Hamelech in birchas Krias Shema, we say over there Tisparech, right? Where is it? I'm reading from a Nusach Svart Siddur. You Ashkenazim will forgive me. Tisparech lanetzach tzereinu malkeinu v'gayaleinu boirei kedoshim yishtabach shimcha la'ad malkeinu yoitzer misharsim. We're giving Shavach Vaidah to the Rabbeinu Shalom, who created Misharsim. He created servants for himself. These are Malachim. Yoitzer Misharsim, Va'asher Misharsav kulam oimdim berum olam. His misharsim, the malachim, they are oimdim berum olam. They're up in Shamayim. Umashbim b'yira yachad b'kol divrei l'kim chayim v'melech olam. So we have over here three words. We have over here misharsim va'asher misharsav. Says the Berurah, the first letter of misharsim is a mem, the first letter of va'asher is a vav, and the first letter of misharsav is a mem. So the Rosh Tevos of misharsim va'asher misharsav is mem vav mem. So what? Says the Bir Halacha, misharsim va'asher misharsav Rosh Tevos mem vav mem. V'hu shem achroin mishem ayin beis. You should know that mem vav mem are the Rosh Tevos of the last Shem Hashem that is part of the extended Shem Hashem of 72 letters. Lachein yesh ledaktek shelo yedalik vav shel v'asher. So make sure you should not say misharsim asher misharsav. You should make sure to say misharsim va'asher misharsav. So you shouldn't lose out the vav. Okay? Ukisha'omer u'boirei choshech. When you say u'boirei choshech, yamashmesh b'tfilah shel rosh. I'm sorry. Kisha'omer yoitzer or, it brings down a minute that when you say Baruch HaTorah Shem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam yoitzer or, you should touch the tfilah shel yad. Ukisha'omer u'boirei choshech yamashmesh b'tfilah shel rosh. You should touch the shel rosh. Many people have this minute. Ma'aritzim u'magdishim kulam b'mem. It should be ma'aritzim that ends with a mem. This is Nusach Ashkenaz. V'yesh gersin b'nun. Some say ma'aritzin with a nun, or magdishin with a nun. V'ha'omer memem tzrichim lahafsik bein mamlichim le'esh shem hakel hamelech. If you're going to say it with a mem, so then when you come to the end of that paragraph, you're going to say u'ma'aritzim u'magdishim u'mamlichim. Mamlichim ends with an end of mem. Then comes the word es shem hakel hamelech hagadol. If you're not careful, you could end up saying like this: umamlichimes. Instead of umamlichim, pause, es, it's umamlichi mes. A mace is a corpse, is a dead person. It almost sounds, chas v'chalila, like you're saying mace es shem hakel hamelech, like the Rebbeinu Shalom Kaviyachol is dead. Chas v'chalila. So the Berurah says, if you have the girsa, if you daven Nusach Ashkenaz and you have a mem at the end of mamlichim, make sure you have a pause between the mamlichim and s. Okay. Weiter says the Berurah. Ritzayin koinehem, you should say Ritzayin koinehem, v'loy Ritzayin koinam. That's brought down from the Lechem Rav Siman Aleph Chei Kasav Hari. V'olos Tamid V'roi Paiskim. V'yesh Omer Ritzayin koinam. Ayin Ateres Kenim Ahuvim. Yeah. Now we say Kulam Ahuvim, Kulam Birurim, Kulam Gibayrim. Ahuvim starts with an Aleph, Birurim starts with a Beis, Gibayrim starts with a Gimel. Rosh Tevis, Aleph Beis Gimel. For who Shem Rishon, this is the first section, Mishem Mem Beis, from the Shem Hashem of 42 letters. The Rosh Tevis of the first section of that Shem is Aleph Beis Gimel. Oisim, Oisim Be'ema, Rosh Tevis Ayin Beis. Oisim Be'ema is Rosh Tevis Ayin Beis. That's a remez to the Shem HaMeforish of 72 letters. The Chala Mechaven B'Shemes Elu, people who have kavanah when they say these parts of davening to these Shemos, it's like they davened v'sikin. They have a promise that they won't be harmed the entire day. See, these are tefillas that were niskan by Anshe Knesset Agdola. There are words over here. We think, big deal, poetic license. So you say it this way, you say it that way. No, these words have to do with Shemos. These words have to do with the Alamas Al-Yonim. We have no idea the layers and layers and layers and layers of depth that there are to our tefillas that were niskan al yidei Anshe Knesset Agdola niskan al yidei Chazal. Okay. We're going to stop over here. We'll pick up tomorrow Mitzvah Shem with Tziv Beis on Tzadik Beis Amud Aleph. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discuss of limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Ron should send Yeshua's and first Parnas and Shaduchim to all those in need, and we should be zeichet to see the Bias God Tzedek. B'meherev Yameinu Amen. Be well.